Please let us sit in silence as we listen to Frank play our prelude for today, Always With Me, by Joe Hisaishi. Tēnā koutou i ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohe. I ngā mate, haere, haere, haere atu rā. Tēnā koutou e te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Haere mai i ngā manuhiri. Haere mai koutou ki tēnei whare karakia, neke atu i te kotahi rautau e nohi tapu ana. Haere mai i ngā mema o te hui tōpa. Ko Rachel McIntosh tōku ingoa, ko te kai whakahaere nai nei. Ko Nikki Smith-Eklund, rawakau Tof Eklund o tātou kai kōrero e nai nei. Ko kanaro a tōro te kaupapa o te rā. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kua nui koutou, kua nui mātou. Mā te rongo ka mohio, mā te mohio ka marama, mā te marama ka mātou, mā te mātou ka ora. Greetings to the mana whenua of this place. To our dead, farewell, farewell, thrice farewell. Greetings to the Auckland Unitarian family. Welcome to our visitors. Welcome to those on Zoom. Welcome to this church made sacred by Auckland Unitarians for almost 124 years. For those of you in the building, please join us after the service for morning tea. It is our sacrament of hospitality. My name is Rachel McIntosh and I am the worship leader today. Nikki Smith-Eklund and Tof Eklund are our speakers today on the theme of neurodiversity. You are welcome as you are. You find us as we are. From listening comes knowledge. From knowledge comes understanding. From understanding comes wisdom. From wisdom comes well-being. Leo, would you mind lighting the chalice for us? We light this chalice so that we may see with our hearts and minds, that we may see new worlds, that we may see each other in all our diversity, neuro and otherwise. We light this chalice so that we may see. My opening words are part of a poem by an anonymous poet writing as the silent poet 50. Gargoyle. You think you know because you read something on the internet. and your wife's best friend's cousin knows someone with it, so you have all the answers and cannot be wrong. Dave down the pub reckons it is all a scam, and really they are just a bit thick. And he knows because he is Dave, and Dave knows fuck. Especially when 7 pints in, God, he is fucking funny. What a legend. We are the problem with the world that is only for the entrepreneur, not the ones who see through the smoke screen, wanting to give love to everyone, using intimidating genders and pronouns instead of glorifying the economies of scale. But they are the snake oil salespeople. So go back to your cave of gossip and rumours. Evolution has stalled for you, genuflecting at the feet of those paid influencers who tell you how to live your life with fictitious remedies of being, leaving us to mop up your mess. Please take a moment to close your eyes and breathe. Breathe in the possibility of tomorrow. Breathe out what is done. Now please stand as you're able to sing our opening hymn, Spirit of Life. And now I invite you, if you wish, to say the covenant of our congregation with me. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is the sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. We pause at this time to hold and honour the very personal joys and sorrows of this gathering. I invite you to come to the front, say your name, light a candle, and briefly share your joy or concern. Or for those on Zoom, please raise your electronic hands and I will call on you as I see you. Take a moment to close your eyes and breathe. Breathe in the possibility of tomorrow, and breathe out what is done. It is now my pleasure to introduce and invite our speakers for today, Nikki Smith-Eklund and their partner, Tof Eklund. They will introduce themselves and their topic.
Kia ora koutou and atamarie. Ko wai maua. My name is Nikki, and this is Tof, who will be acting as my support NB this morning. We are, as you can tell, Americans. We immigrated to New Zealand in 2017 after the election of Donald Trump. Yes, and we are now here. We identify as late diagnosed or late identified neurodivergent people. I'm specifically identify as autistic. I think Tof has landed on
ODHD or autistic and ADHD traits.
Our children are also neurodivergent. Our son was diagnosed autistic at right around the age of 3. And our second child is not diagnosed, but we know enough to know what we're dealing with. So today, I think perhaps the original prompt might have been to talk a little bit about parenting and neurodiversity, but it has become apparent that not everyone is completely in agreement on what neurodiversity means and how that term should be used. And so this morning we will be focusing, if you'd like to go ahead and start the slides. We will be focusing mostly on defining some terms to make sure that we are all singing from the same hymn book, as it were, when we are talking about neurodivergence. If you can advance, please. And you can go ahead and advance to the next slide. Thank you. We'll start by talking about what neurodivergence is not. It is not a diagnosis. That is, neurodivergence does not appear in the DSM. It is not something that a doctor can assign to you. It is a catch-all term for a wide variety of things that you may be diagnosed with, or that maybe you identify with, or that are temporary states. Basically, anything that is mind-altering will make you neurodivergent, at least for that period of time. And it is not a euphemism. So it's if you find yourself using neurodivergent to soften what you want to say, particularly in terms of, like, if you just mean autism, please just say autism. Let's try to, there's still stigma around an autism diagnosis, and we want to focus more on autistic pride. So yeah, if you mean autism, say autism. Next slide, please. What neurodivergence is. If you are not familiar, I would like to introduce you to someone called Cassiane Asasamasu. She was a young person on the internet in the late 1990s, finding community in autistic spaces. And she, as a young person, coined the term neurodivergent. Even if it was that she was in autistic spaces and identifies as autistic, she never intended for neurodivergence to only apply to autism. She has very recently said in an NPR interview, it is a very, very large tent. However big you think it is, it's bigger than that. Neurodivergence covers anything that is outside of what people think of as typical, normal, and I use that term very carefully, cognitive or social behavior. So, I mean, we're talking about everything, okay? Autism, ADHD, intellectual disabilities, mental health issues of all stripes. Nick Walker, who I will also be, this is my Bible, folks, right here. This is Neuroqueer Heresies by Nick Walker. This is he, they, whatever they want to do right now, trans person who is struggling in an American context. They're the authority. I've lost it. Where am I at? Yeah, anything that is outside of what is your expectation. So how do we use this? Oh, next slide, please. So some examples of correct usage, okay? So neurodiversity makes groups of humans more resilient, all right? Neurodiversity is always in reference to groups, always to groups. A person is not neurodiverse. If a person is neurodivergent. So if you see something that is referencing like, oh, this is for neurodiverse people, it's like, that's for everybody. What an inclusive space you have. That is for all people. Human beings as a group, as a species, are neurodiverse. Also, you might say, I might say, my child is neurodivergent. And I might do that because maybe I'm in a context where I don't feel comfortable outing my child with a specific diagnosis. Or my child might have multiple neurodivergences. So what I'm communicating in that case is that the way I raise my child and my household may not look like what you expect, or the way that you might do things. Next, please. So now that we've established that, I hope, I would like to talk about kind of where this comes out of and where we would like to go. So when we're talking about neurodiversity, it's an idea, it's a concept that human beings exist in a range, a wide range of cognitive abilities and function and sensory requirements. It's a huge range, and we need all of it. We need everybody, okay? And we are better off when we have everyone together and we aren't segregating certain kinds of minds out. All right, so looking back, there is the medical model. The medical model of disability locates disability inside of a person. One person. A person is responsible for that disability, okay? It's a disease, it's an injury that has happened to a person, it's a tragedy. And we are looking for cures and treatments and preventions.
Aspirin.
Hmm?
Oh, Tylenol, sorry. Acetaminophen.
Yes. And sometimes people find the medical model has been used for bad things. And it is currently where some people would like to get back to, because they are scared of change. I think they're scared of change. Yep. Baby doll, do you have any?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, on that, medicine is helpful, but the medical model of disability has deep historical connections to eugenics, the idea that some people are more worthy than others, and that, and with that, one of the things we see today, and this is one of the places where neurodivergence and transgender issues and nonconformity intersect, is an attempt to pathologize people, to define who they are as a sickness, as a disease, as sometimes, at the same time, a moral failing. Because if you pathologize people, you can claim authority over them and do what you want with them.
They lose their autonomy. All right, so moving on. We have the social model of disability, which was developed in around the 1970s and is still pretty current in the way that we look at disability. It underlies the New Zealand disability strategy. And that acknowledges that people have impairments, that people have things that are difficult for them. They have things like I have social communication impairments. And that makes life harder for me sometimes. I also am missing, I'm blind in one eye. This is an impairment. It makes it I don't drive because I don't have depth perception. That's an impairment. But the disabling part of it comes in your relationship to the environment around you and to other people. So instead of your disability being located in yourself, the disability is in your relationship with your environment and your community. And that environment can be disabling or it can be enabling. Your relationships with other people can be disabling or they can be enabling. And that is a choice that we all make together, not a choice that is the responsibility of one person. Okay?
A really easy way to frame this in terms of how society supports or fails to support people's impairments is that streetlights are a humongous social accommodation for sighted people who cannot navigate at night without light. The blind community does not need streetlights.
So the neurodiversity paradigm is, at its heart, actually, it's a social justice movement. It is an idea of how we can all reframe how we think about neurocognitive differences and accommodate those for everyone so that we can all live in community together. This is the definition from Nick Walker. And number one, neurodiversity is a natural and valuable form of human diversity. Number two, the idea that there is one normal or healthy type of brain or mind or one right style of neurocognitive functioning is a culturally constructed fiction, no more valid and no more conducive to a healthy society or to the overall well-being of humanity than the idea that there is one normal or right ethnicity, gender, or culture. And number three, the social dynamics that manifest in regard to neurodiversity are similar to other forms of human diversity. There is an idea that there is autistic culture, that it's not, as a neurotype, it has its own culture around it, instead of looking at it as a deficit. It's the same kind of thing as like the deaf community, as deaf with a capital D, has deaf culture, right? That kind of thing. That's where we are going. Okay, next slide. I'm gonna run out of time. I love this phrase, te whakapapa o te whakaaro. Thinking about where ideas come from, all right? Because if we know where things come from, right, then we know where we're going. This idea comes out of a very specific place and time. This is coming out of autistic culture in the 90s, in the late 90s, in these nascent online communities, mostly in the US, with some, but it's a very Anglophone idea. And I think in Aotearoa we need to be aware of where we are getting our ideas from, because we do import a lot of ideas, some good and some bad, as we are seeing. And we need to be aware of where things are coming from. Next slide, please. We do have our own ways of looking at autism, specifically, and at disability more widely. If you guys are not familiar with Enabling Good Lives, I highly recommend that you give that a look. That is our current framework for keeping disabled people in the community, for making sure that disabled people can live their best possible lives, normal, regular lives, ordinary lives, like ordinary people, with the acknowledgement of all of New Zealand's past things. The New Zealand disability strategy is currently being refreshed by this government, so that is something to keep an eye on, because that will probably not go the way that we would like for it to go. And the New Zealand autism guidelines that came out in about 2022 are actually quite good, and I recommend taking a look at them. But yeah, that's us. Whakaaro, Patai.
If there's time at the end, I think we will have a short Q&A, because this raises more questions than it answers probably, as opposed to discussion time.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you both for that. Now, please take a moment to close your eyes and breathe. Breathe in what you have heard. Breathe out what is done. My closing words are by 20th century surrealist poet Paul Éluard. First in English, my translation, and then in the original French. The earth is blue. The earth is blue like an orange. Never a mistake, words don't lie. They no longer prompt you to sing. It's the kisses' turn to get along. Fools and loves, she her wedding ring mouth, all the secrets, all the smiles, And what clothes of indulgence to believe her naked? Wasps bloom green, the dawn passes around your neck, a necklace of windows, wings cover the leaves. You have all the joys of the sun, all the sun on earth, on the paths of your beauty. La terre est bleue. La terre est bleue comme une orange. Jamais une erreur, les mots ne mentent pas. Ils ne vous donnent plus à chanter autour des baisers de s'entendre. Les fous et les amours, elle sa bouche d'alliance. Tous les secrets, tous les sourires, et quels vêtements d'indulgence à la croire toute nue. Les guêpes fleurissent verts, l'aube se passe autour du cou. Un collier de fenêtres, des ailes couvrent des feuilles. Tu as toutes les joies solaires, tout le soleil sur la terre, sur les chemins de ta beauté. And now I invite you to say with me the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, or the power of transformation. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. So now we're going to take some time for Q&A, and I wonder if Tof and Nikki can come back up and answer from here. And Maria is going to use a handheld mic, and if anybody online wants to ask a question, if you could raise your electronic hands. Are you okay to call on people if you see their electronic hands up?
I can do that.
Yeah, great. And in church, if you've got a question, please do wait for the mic so that people on Zoom can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. My last job was with ADHD mental health, and I worked with people who have personality disorders, which I happen to have one of. It turns out that this term pathologize is one that has, it's caused me a great deal of confusion. Because as I understand it, and I Googled it as well, it can be either a physical change, and deformity, if you want to call it that, something you're born with, that way, where you have a physical difference that can make life more difficult, or it can have this whole cultural, social spin to it.
Yep.
And I mean, the two are widely divergent. With my personality disorder, I happen to have a brain that's not formed like most people's. And indeed, it causes me trouble. So from what I understand of a medical term, I am neurodivergent because my brain doesn't process information. It can't process information like most other people can. I mean, but one of the things I really appreciated about your presentation was this notion that we're all neurodivergent.
Well, we are all human beings, and human beings as a species are neurodiverse. So I do get a little when people say, because I wouldn't say we are all neurodivergent, because that smacks of like, oh, we're all a little bit autistic, which is not helpful. But I do think the understanding that what is accepted as normal and as like sort of perfect functioning is an incredibly narrow idea. And there just aren't a lot of people who actually like fit in that box, particularly not all the time. and not through the entirety of their lifespan, right? I mean, even as we age, we might find that our brains do not work the way that we would like for them to. And that's also a kind of neurodivergence. Thoughts?
Just to add to that, because something that we'd spoken about that we didn't get to in the talk is cultural construction. The idea that things we often take for granted are culturally constructed means that they didn't have to be the way they are, and that while aspects of nature, things we can observe, things we agree upon, are incorporated into cultural constructions, that the cultural construction itself is specific, historical, and ultimately arbitrary, by which I mean what is what is neurotypical.
Neuronormative also works.
Is itself culturally constructed and is not the same in all cultures across time. What it is always not descriptive of everyone. And one person who might be well within the range of what's normal in a certain society might be marked out and stigmatized for their difference in another. And just because I introduced the word pathology before, there is the medical definition of pathology, and then there is that cultural and specifically social justice definition of pathology, and those are two different meanings to the same word.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vivian. Thank you for your explanations. I've got at least 4 of my grandchildren diagnosed neurodiverse. I found it extremely difficult as a grandparent. One of them is now 19, and she's been taught a lot of coping mechanisms, and she's fantastic. I found her extremely difficult when she was young. If things weren't quite right, if we turned into the wrong road,
Yeah.
she would start yelling at me, you're doing it wrong,
Yeah.
which caused me a lot of angst, but she's now okay. Now the 16-year-old is been diagnosed with ADHD, and I have a lot of trouble communicating with her. She kind of just doesn't want to communicate. And then there's one who's really bad. He's about 11, and he just never looks at you and never engages. I find, how do I cope with this? Do I just kind of ignore?
There are quite a few good, I'm a reader, and I have some book recommendations for
Thank you.
There is a local, a person here called Jolene Stockman. She's written something, it's called Notes for Neuronavigators, which is, I feel like it's a little book. It doesn't take that long. It lays things out quite well. But you do have to rethink a lot of your expectations.
Yes, I've noticed that.
You need to adjust your expectations, and it takes a lot of empathy.
Which is difficult. It is. I'm being honest here.
Yeah, and we have a lot of expectations about how children should behave, the kind of respect or deference that they show their elders. Neurodivergent people, particularly autistic and ADHD people, do not do well with hierarchy. In particular, they don't understand this whole this person is in this position, I should be deferential. Or I should trust this person's instructions implicitly. We often come off as non-compliant because we have trouble following directions that don't come with a lot of context, okay? If you're asking me to do something, I need to know why. What is this for? When is it due by? Is it really that important that I do it? I have some books to recommend to you.
That would be great if you send that to Maria or Rachel and let us know. Thanks.
Sure.
And I just want to add to that as a very general note, one of the characteristics, especially of autistic neurodivergence, is not giving normal social cues. An autistic person is unlikely to look you in the eyes unless you demand it, which then becomes traumatic for them, and may seem to not hear you at all, but still be listening. Of course, they may seem to not hear you at all and not be listening. So finding ways to communicate about when you need them to hear what you're saying is really important.
Kia ora, my name's Kay. I've got a slightly different angle that I'm coming from, is I have a friend who has been in a marriage with a neurodivergent partner, and just hearing the word empathy made me want to ask this question. Her issue is she finds it really hard to get empathy from him. And it's come to the point where the relationship cannot be sustained. He's had a diagnosis, but he wavers in how willing he is to commit to recognising that diagnosis. And she just is burnt out from the lack of empathy on his part. And I'm just wondering if you have any resources that might be available to them.
There is, I don't know about, that sounds like you need a neuro-affirming marriage counselor on that one. I am not qualified to do that.
Do you know of any?
No. I mean, like mixed neurotype households I feel like that's a real challenge. I mean, even like Tof and I are pretty well aligned, but even our different flavors of neurodivergence will rub up against each other. There is actually something called the double empathy problem, which is a one theory of autism that is and one to look up. I forget Milton, I think, is the guy. But yeah, the double empathy problem is that it's what, because autistic empathy can look different than neurotypical empathy. So an autistic person may be empathetic, but it doesn't look like empathy from and an autistic person may also be hyper empathetic, which is like, I mean, you know, like if I see a child like fall down and hurt themselves on the street, like I start crying, right? But if my child gets hurt, what happens is that I have to shut down in order to address what is going on with them. So, like, stranger's kid gets hurt, I look like I am, but my kid, I look like a brick wall because I have to shut all of that down in order to address the problem, or else I won't be able to function at all. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's hard.
And just to add to that, without suggesting this will solve it, because that's a real tangle, one of the things that probably needs to happen, if there's a possibility of finding common ground, is to have a discussion about what sort of shows of empathy or things her partner can do, her husband can do when she needs it, and the possibility that there may be something she asks for where he says, I don't understand, or that doesn't make sense, or even I can't. Almost any autistic person can give a hug, though some are relatively touch averse. But if it's a show of sympathy, that may not be in his wheelhouse, but he is capable of, whether or not he's ready to, he's capable of understanding when it's explained, and he is capable of doing things that are helpful if he knows that they're what he needs to do in the situation. But their communications may be so broken down that that conversation can't be had at the moment. Oh, yes, okay. We do have our own very narrow views of what to expect from other people. Thanks for making this point. But we do have to reckon with what is culturally constructed. There are indeed different in ways that are dangerous to society, such as culturally constructed categories are used as psychopath, sociopath, and narcissist. We see some people at work as leaders of some nations. Where do you place such people?
Not all neurodivergent people are good people. Just like, I mean, anybody else you can have. We're human beings like anybody else, and yes, sometimes people are dangerous.
I don't remember where to find this. I believe it was from an NPR podcast. It was about sociopathy, and was research from a researcher who came to identify himself as sociopathic, as having all the potential, all the basic biological traits, and brain structure as best as his research allowed, which I'm not going to get into because I'm not qualified, to be a sociopath. But he wasn't a sociopath in any of the ways that indicate sociopathic harm. And he attributed this to the upbringing and support he had. Also, he found it helpful to have figured this out about himself because what he could see in his own life was some extreme risk-taking behavior. That was where it did show. And you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. And people are responsible for their own actions. But as a society, if we support people better, if we try to make sure that trauma in childhood doesn't go unaddressed, we can help break cycles of violence. But there will always be people of every type you can name who choose to do harm to other people. That is a challenge and a problem that we cannot, I don't think, eliminate. Reduce? Yes.
I think you do have to acknowledge that there are some people who don't have brakes, who have poor impulse control, who for things outside of their control, they don't have good control over their behavior. And those people need support, and they need very specialized support. But they don't need to be stigmatized. We can support people, we can help people without just going, oh, that's just a bad person. Especially when it is the case that they don't. That's really tough. It's really tough. It's like it's about agency, and it's about who has. Yeah.
And neurotype never dictates behavior. Bad behavior can and should be called out and opposed. And what is opposed then is the behavior, and not a trait of the person who is responsible for that behavior, which isn't to say don't call a harmful politician a narcissist. But there may be people who have especially things like personality disorders, borderline personality disorder, and I'm picking some of the other names, who are used to being treated as an inherent risk and danger because of what's associated with that. And media often describes villainous characters as mad or insane. The behavior's the problem, just like the anti-fascist notion that you fight a Nazi because they're a Nazi. The moment they stop behaving in Nazi ways, stop advocating for Nazi goals, you don't have a fight with them anymore. Here we are. I've had issues with different therapists who aren't comfortable with diagnosis, as they aren't sure if I'm ASD, ADHD, as I've also got many trauma responses. They say it's difficult to know what is trauma and what is neurodivergent. How do you also come across this?
PTSD is a neurodivergence. That's the answer to that. And I have yet to meet an autistic person that isn't traumatized in some way. I don't know that we are, at the way that we treat people now, I don't know that that's possible, to have an autistic person who is free from trauma, either familial trauma or trauma from school. Autistic people are also very susceptible to grooming, and so there is trauma that comes down that avenue. You can't tease it out. But my answer to that is that, like, PTSD is a neurodivergence. It changes how your brain works.
And I would just add that if you think you might be autistic and or ADHD, and your therapist says, well, I can't even consider that because you have trauma.
You might need a new therapist.
Yeah. And it may be hard to find a good one, and it's hard to find a therapist at all right now. But a therapist who dismisses that because of that is, at best, better than not having a therapist at all, and even that's a maybe.
Right.
Okay, I think are we out of time?
Thank you.
Can we just thank our speakers? And I just invite you one more time just to close your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath and consider what you have heard. And breathe out.